Hello, Mandy.
Hi, can you hear me?
Absolutely. And hello,
Great.
Amy, and hello, Michelle.
Hi. Hello.
Great. Well, as usual, one little technical snag before we got started, but we're all here now, so this is terrific. And it looks like our participants are still filtering in. So I'm going to kick things off and give it a slow roll before we get into the meat of things. But welcome to this session of Counsel Connect, produced by the Corporate Counsel section of the Atlanta Bar Association. We're glad to do this special program for law students. Um, our section at the Atlanta Bar is made up of a couple hundred practicing attorneys and almost 100 law students. So we thought it was appropriate to do some programming specific for our law students. It's a beautiful day in Atlanta, and our program today is going to be about uh, 20 minutes of panel discussion and then 20 minutes of breakout room, where each breakout room will have several law students and one of our board members. And we'll talk again for about 15 or 20 minutes before wrapping up. So one last bit of housekeeping. At the end of the first session, the panel discussion, there will be a bit of Q&A. So I think you can use the Q&A button to be putting questions into the queue if you like. So with that being said, we're so glad to have you with us. Law school is an exciting, stressful, and challenging time, and thinking about your career is in the short term and long term is important but challenging. So we've got three great attorneys who are going to chat in a panel format. And I'm going to turn it over to Mandy, our moderator, to introduce herself and the other panelists. Thanks.
Yep. Hi. Thank you, Logan. Good to see you all. So I'm Mandy Sweeney. I'm in-house counsel with a chemical company named Birla Carbon. We're an affiliate of Aditya Birla Group, which is a conglomerate out of India. And I'm really excited to have here two great attorneys on our panel. Amy Buice. Amy is in the litigation department with Smith, Gambrell, and Russell here in Atlanta, one of the oldest Atlanta law firms. She practices and specializes in antitrust and commercial litigation. And we have Michelle Stewart. Michelle Stewart is a partner at King & Spalding. She is in the corporate finance, and she specializes in merger and acquisition and corporate work. And prior to serving with King & Spalding, Michelle has been in several in-house counsel roles. I think last she had been with Coke Companies as their chief counsel in M&A, and also I believe she had previously been with Georgia Pacific in a similar role. So it's great because we have two attorneys on the panel, a litigator and a transactional attorney, or at least of a transactional ilk. And usually those are two different breeds. Although I'm sure that Michelle in her past has handled some litigation as well. So it's really nice to come at it from two different angles. And I guess for right now, I'm just going to open the floor. Maybe Amy, let's start with you. And if you could just talk a little bit about yourself and kind of your professional journey that you have taken into your current role.
Sure. So, like Mandy said, I'm at Smith, Gambrell, and Russell, and I do a lot of litigation, but because I do antitrust, I also get to do a lot of corporate stuff. So it's kind of a really fun role where I get to serve my clients in a variety of ways. I didn't know that I was going to be an antitrust lawyer when I started at Smith, Gambrell, and Russell. When I was a law student, I went on LinkedIn and was looking for lawyers who graduated from the college I went to, Swanee, which is a small university in Tennessee, who were partners at law firms in Atlanta. And I found one at Smith, Gambrell and Russell and reached out, had a conversation, and now I work a ton with him on antitrust. So it just kind of happened. But I always tell law students that you have resources you don't even know about. You obviously have your career centers, but LinkedIn is such an asset when you're looking to find connections, especially if you're not, from Atlanta and you want to be in Atlanta, or if you're wanting to go to a different state and don't even know where to start. I just happened to reach out to that person, and now I work with him. And when I started at the firm, I got put on a really big antitrust case, knowing nothing about antitrust, but found it really fascinating. So I bought a treatise on it, and then I read the treatise and just kind of fell in love with the area and started working on expanding my practice. I also like to tell law students and first year lawyers that it's such a fun time for you in your career because you just get to be a sponge. And you're trying to absorb as much information as you can, and you're not going to be perfect, and everyone knows you don't know everything right when the first day you walk into a firm. So there's just so much excitement and promise with those early years of getting to just decide what kind of lawyer you want to be and brand yourself and become the expert in the area that really fascinates you. So that's the long way of telling you how I ended up where I am today, but I'll hand it back to you, Mandy.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Amy. I think you hit on a lot of really good points. One of which is the practice of law, while it is a specialization, it still has a lot to do with your relationships and connections, like a lot of different fields do. And as a law student, I think that can sound intimidating, or someone who's just starting out on their career, because they're like, well, I don't have these connections, how I don't know these people. And it really doesn't need to sound so off-putting. It really can just be like somebody you chatted up at the coffee shop, or happened to be, who happened to have some familiarity with law or something like that. I mean, it really, and also those relationships build over time. So it's not something that needs to be intimidating. Although I remember it being a bit intimidating when I was in law school, like, oh, it's all about connections. Like, how are these said connections made?
Yeah.
So a lot of them are just organic in like what you do.
Yeah, I mean, Mandy, my dad's an Episcopal priest and my mom's a nurse. Like, I didn't have a deep bench of legal connections in Atlanta. So I kind of had to go on LinkedIn and start searching folks and join various panels and committees. And so even if you're starting from a place of not as many connections and you're making connections in law school, keep in touch with those friends, and also don't be afraid to send some emails and make some calls. Some people might not respond to you, but that's okay. Somebody will, and you'll learn from that person. So.
All right, Michelle, let's turn the floor over to you, if you don't mind discussing a little bit about yourself and your journey to where you are.
Sure. Yeah. So I went into law school knowing that I wanted to do transactional side of the house. So I knew I didn't want to be a litigator. So that helped narrow things down a little bit. I will say I kind of went about it between my first and second year in law school. One of the law firms in Atlanta came and interviewed at University of Virginia, where I was, and I was able to get a call back and ended up getting a position that summer at that firm, with not knowing anybody there. So no connections. It was just taking advantage of the on-campus interviews. But I kind of knew that was at a different firm, not at King & Spalding, where I am now and where I started my career. But I kind of knew that I'd always wanted to be at King & Spalding. Growing up in Atlanta, I knew the firm name. And so I did. This is actually kind of funny, Amy, but there was a partner at King & Spalding who was really good friends with my aunt, who they met at University of the South in Sewanee.
Get out of here.
Tennessee. So there is that connection. And so he was in a different group, but he kind of helped guide a little bit. It was kind of that foot in the door. I obviously, once you kind of get in the door, you have to make it yourself, and have the grades and the charisma to kind of get you the position. But that's really funny that we both
That's so funny.
have that Sewanee connection. So I knew I wanted to do transactional work. I didn't know exactly what. After I spent 2 summers at 2 different law firms, by the end of it, I really thought I was going to be like a securities lawyer and sort of work in the capital market space. But when I got to the firm, and I graduated in 2009, so it was right in the middle of the Great Recession, where some of us didn't even know if we were going to still have jobs, and my start date was pushed back several months. And I was a nanny, and another guy that started with me, he worked at Baby Gap when he was like during those 4 months. So we all just sort of found different things to do in what was a very stressful time. And luckily we started, and there was more work in the M&A space than there was in the capital market space at that point. So I kind of lucked into the M&A world that way. And and found that I really enjoyed the work, and enjoyed the partners I was working with, and built those relationships with the partners, and found that that was the space I really enjoyed, was the M&A world. But also I knew I wanted to do transactional work, and I had a pretty good idea that I would work at a firm for 3 to 4 years and then go in-house. That was kind of my plan. My uncle was a lawyer, and had some discussions with him, and it kind of seemed like that was a good way to approach it. But once I got to the firm, I really enjoyed firm life. I loved everybody I worked with. I was able to really find ways to, yes, some weeks and some days are really challenging and really demanding, and you don't feel like you have much balance, but a deal flow is sort of up and down, and it will always slow down. So over the course of the year, I usually, was able to catch up and eventually get some balance. But an opportunity came up working with a client. They had a role open up for an M&A lawyer at Georgia Pacific, and it was an opportunity I really couldn't turn down at the time. So that's how I ended up going in-house. It was a great opportunity. Really, I was there for 5 years. I sort of worked at Georgia Pacific. They're a subsidiary of Coke Industries and the Coke company. So that's how I ended up on that side of things at the end as well. Really got to learn, why are they making decisions, what impacts whether or not they're going to move forward with a deal, get in, be in the room with the decision makers, learn how to have those discussions with, sorry, can you hear my dog?
Barely.
Okay. If it's bothering you, I can open the door. If
it's not bothering at all. In fact, I wouldn't have been able to tell it was a dog. It
okay.
sounded like a voice.
Okay, good. So over, after I spent several years at Georgia Pacific, learned how they're making decisions, how do you speak to business people, what questions do I need to be prepared to answer in meetings, because they really were looking to me to help them make a decision. It was really a great learning experience. But over time, I kind of, their M&A strategy was changing. I wasn't doing the types of deals that I really had loved before when I was at the firm. I wasn't, getting to see the same variety. And also I missed, working with younger associates. I had 2 kids at that point. I knew that, my career trajectory might have been different if I had had a resource to look up to, who was in a similar position that I was, and that by going back to the firm, I could be a resource for younger associates coming up who are trying to figure out, how do I balance a family with the demands of an M&A world, an M&A career, and missed the work I did at King & Spalding. So that's how I ended up back at the firm. And I've been back now for 4 years. But I think, Mandy, Amy, what you both said, connections, keeping up with people, whether it's thinking about family members you might know, or I had some discussions with one of my, not my law professors, but one of my legal studies professors at undergrad when I was trying to make a decision about where I went. I called her up and had a discussion with her. So she wasn't even in law school, but used to work at a firm in Atlanta. So you never know who might be that person who could give you a really great piece of advice, or say, hey, let me call up so-and-so and see if they'll meet with you. So don't be, connections really are important, but don't feel like you have to, know somebody already right off the bat. There are other ways to, kind of get to meet people. I know King & Spalding has a number of different sessions sort of separate from interviewing, where we either come to law schools, or we have this Home for the Holidays event where law students, can come to the office and meet us. So take advantage of those, show up and get to know the different lawyers at the different firms. That really tells you a lot about the firm itself based on, who's showing up at those recruiting events.
Yeah, for sure. So Michelle, you just did a really nice job of kind of pinpointing and highlighting a few things that you really like about firm practice, and you sort of pinpointed some of the things you enjoyed about in-house. Amy, I'm curious, and there is a sophistication that large firms offer that it's hard to replicate elsewhere, in-house and otherwise. And so, Amy, I'm curious as to your thoughts on some of the highlights, the positive things that you experience in your practice, and some of the things, if you were Grandmaster and owner of the universe, you could change about your current role. Can you kind of speak to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think Smith, Gambrell, and Russell does a really good job of giving me the tools I need to get a focus on what I want to focus on, which is the substance of what I do. So, I'm not dealing with a lot of administrative stuff or details that distract, I guess, from the really fun stuff, the really exciting antitrust issues and litigations. And so, I mean, that's definitely, I mean, being at a place that, can support you, and provide you with resources to be able to focus on developing as an attorney, and giving you those resources in terms of taking off certain administrative things from your to-do list, but also give you opportunities. I mean, next week, the firm is supporting me going to the annual antitrust ABA spring meeting in Washington, D.C., and being able to go and be with all of those bright people and listen to these panels talking about the biggest issues that clients are facing and the biggest issues with the new administration in antitrust is so invaluable. So being in a firm that really supports not only you billing the hours, but also developing your practice and developing into a good lawyer, not just churning out work and being a cog in the machine, but investing in you and trying to make you the best you can be. So I mean, I think that's been a big highlight for me is being in a place that I know values my development and not just the numbers in a column. Of course, those help, but that's definitely a highlight. If I could change something about firm life, I mean, no job is perfect. I think about that a lot is there's no career, there's no job that is perfect. And Michelle talked a little bit about the balance, especially as a younger lawyer, finding that balance can be difficult for a number of reasons, one of which is people's expectations. There are those people who do expect you to sacrifice balance in those first couple years of practice. And there are multiple kinds of lawyer you can be. You do have the people billing the 2,000 plus hours a year. You also have the lawyers who aren't. So just kind of understanding that there are different choices and avenues you can go and different levels you can choose to operate at has really meant something to me, because it can take a while to realize that. And really in your first year, it is harder to do that in your first year, but understanding and seeking out people that you identify as those that have found a way to have that family and to also be a great lawyer and to also coach a team or identify those people and be looking for those people who are leading the kind of life you want to lead, and are the kind of lawyer and the kind of person that you want to be, and get their advice and talk to them. So I think that's I did the classic turn the bad into the good, but if you seek out the right people early on, you can really make this profession more fulfilling in a lot of ways.
Those are all good insights. Thank you, Amy. Because there's a number of law students on the call, and I think that there are some more entry-level attorneys. In my experience, in-house has pulled more from transactional practice, and I'm curious if that has been your impression as well, both Michelle and Amy. And additionally, are there any insights that you can give to the people who are listening about pragmatic, either experience in pro bono or classes potentially that they could take that kind of translate into the actual practice of law relatively well? And specifically too, if they're looking for in-house, are there classes that might be offered at the school that they can look into, or are there pro bono opportunities that you're familiar with that they can kind of explore to set themselves up on that path best? So Michelle, why don't we start with you on this one?
Sure. Yeah. So, there's probably some truth to that transactional work does lend itself a little bit better to going in-house. I will say I do know a lot of litigators who have gone in-house also. So I don't think you have to look at it like, oh, I have to do this if I want to go in-house eventually. I think it kind of depends on what type of place or role you would go in-house, right? Because I think the litigators tend to go to, larger companies that are facing more litigation and have a larger legal department. But I don't want people to think that it's, one or the other. From my perspective, I think regardless of which direction you were going to go, and if you're interested in litigation, but think you might later be interested in going in-house, I think this would maybe even be a bigger recommendation, is to think about what are ways that you can get better at thinking like a business person, thinking like your clients. So whether or not, if you don't have a background in business classes, does your law school offer understanding financial statements, or sort of a basics of corporate finance type class? Because there's a certain language out there that business people use, and regardless of whether or not you're a litigator or transactional and going in-house, you're going to be exposed to that a lot more. So I think taking advantage of those types of classes gets you sort of familiar with some of the language that you'll hear as you go along, and it won't be the first time you've heard it. And so whether that's at law school, or if you see a CLE that might be helpful, once you're practicing, or even, making sure when you're having discussions with clients or lawyers and someone's talking about something that you can tell is really more business focused, really try to really pay attention and think about like why they're making those decisions, what's getting there. And if you're curious about something, ask the lawyer after the fact, like, hey, do you mind if I, ask that client to, for 5 minutes of their time just to get more information on that, asking questions and making sure you sort of understand those things. Because once you get in-house, you're not just thinking about from a legal perspective, you're thinking about what's best for the business, what are the risks, what are we weighing from, the benefit. And I think having that familiarity is very valuable.
Yeah, I would echo that for a number of different reasons. One thing, I think it's nice to be able to work your way around a balance sheet, and that's kind of expected once you get to a certain level, because you are evaluating companies that you want to invest in, or, go in on a joint venture or something of that nature. But also, just more at the beginning level, oftentimes attorneys are, when you're negotiating an agreement, kind of like the last set of eyes on what's going to happen. And a lot of the language that we're putting in does dictate the ultimate business end. I mean, it's impossible to kind of bifurcate them completely. And so it's really nice to always approach an agreement as to, does this even make sense from a business perspective? Or, so that kind of what Michelle was hitting on, like try to approach from a business sense, is critical to being, in my view, a good in-house attorney. Amy, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think clinics are really good. I did one completely unrelated to what I do now, but I still found it helpful. I did an immigration clinic where I help people get citizenship or their green cards, and even having that experience of interacting with a client, like the person who's trying to get their green card or trying to naturalize. I mean, that experience of gathering the information, preparing them, talking with them, even that, I mean, it sounds so basic, but it's such good experience to develop those skills. I mean, a clinic client is still a client. So being able to have clients as a law student is a really good experience, I think. I know at Georgia, there's also an appellate litigation clinic where students write real briefs and argue real cases under the supervision of lawyers. And obviously, if you want to be a litigator, experiences like that are invaluable. But so that's all I got.
Yeah, that's great. I'm going to stop for a moment just because I see we're 25 minutes in, and I do want to allow time for questions if there are any. Logan, have any questions come through that we need to kind of address?
Yes, I'm partway back. Let's see. There we go. So we had one, I just answered half of the question. So the question was in two parts. It was, I'm a 4L graduating in May. First question, should my resume be 1 or 2 pages? My answer, as someone who sees a ton of resumes, is the important thing is that someone can read it quickly and understand your experience and not get bogged down and frustrated while reading it. So 1 or 2 pages, I don't think it really matters between those. I wouldn't do any more than 2 pages. Other question is, I don't know if anyone on the panel has a thought on this, but it is whether to start applying for jobs now or after taking the bar in July.
Would you, either of you like to? I would definitely say now.
I would say the sooner the better. Yes.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah, and on the 1 to 2 page thing, I would say I wouldn't do a 2-page resume with listing like every job you've ever had if it's not related to law. I think of like 2-page resumes if you're a lateral and you've got a lot of key experience that's like dead on to what they're looking for, then okay, maybe. But I wouldn't have a 2-page resume listing jobs you had in high school and in college.
I echo that from Amy, because as a law student, unless you have prior work experience,
Yeah.
it's just to look a little, you just have to be careful about looking pretentious with a 2-pager. I mean, most people who are looking at a law student's resume are not expecting a ton of pertinent legal experience because you're brand new. So I would say, yeah, what Amy said.
I brought one question that I brought one with me that I would love for someone to give their perspective on, whether it's from the in-house or law firm side, is, for new lawyers, soon to be new lawyers, or folks who have a couple of years ahead of them. What are you seeing as far as soft or more technical skill sets that are, kind of game changers, or something to be aware of for young lawyers? I mean, people talk about in general terms, well, everybody needs to know how to be a prompt engineer with AI, or everyone, needs to learn the soft skills of, managing up and managing sideways. Any, high level, items you would throw out to our audience to embrace?
I have a non-AI answer because I feel like that is there's all this speculation that AI is going to replace junior associates. Sorry, but I think just a really basic one that I've found for some reason is harder for younger lawyers is responsiveness. Practice just being responsive and responding to an email when you get it if you can. Because sometimes even just confirming you got something, shooting back received, will provide comments soon, or just being responsive and not sitting on an email for hours and hours or days and days. I mean, I think goes a long way as a young lawyer to make you seem reliable and responsive from the beginning is I think
Yeah.
valuable.
I have 2 things I would throw out there. One is the softer skill. One, I would say from an AI perspective, while I don't think it's going to take everyone's jobs, I think it is something that everybody needs to, understand. How can you use it? How can you take advantage of it to make your life easier and make you better at your job, to leverage it? So something that you shouldn't shy away from, and it's not going, I don't think it's going anywhere. So everybody kind of needs to figure out, how can I use it to, make me better at my job. But then the second thing that I think is really a skill that will take you far, because no matter what level you are, junior associate, senior associate, partner, is whoever you're working for. So as a junior, it's probably the associate up or the partner. What can you do to make their life easier? As if you're working with a client, what can you do to make your client's life easier? If you're thinking like that and helping make, you want your client to look good when they get up in front of their business team, whatever it is that they've asked from you, your work product will be better. What try to anticipate their questions, and you then make yourself invaluable to that person, which in turn, can gain you better flexibility in the future, wherever you end up. If you've made yourself invaluable, you make someone's life easier, they want to work with you, then, when you turn around and need something, whether it's, going on vacation or, need to step out for some, for doctor's appointment, they're more likely to be understanding and try to, make your life a little bit easier because of everything you've done to help them, look good in front of their clients or look good in front of their boss or whatever it might be.
I love that. And I tell you, we, in my role with Latitude, we work doing permanent placements of experienced attorneys and also flexible assignments. And, it's those soft skills. I mean, knowing the law is, table stakes, as they say, right, in your area. But, when we get people who have great references where their former boss or supervisor says, that they were, they worked hard, but gosh, they really understood the business or the practice, and they were always, one step ahead of, helping keep the project moving, or, knowing what the senior attorneys in their group were going to need. I mean, that's just, it makes a big difference. Let me suggest that in the interest of time, it's about time to go into our breakout rooms where we can continue more of this discussion. So we're going to put one or two of our board members in each of the breakout rooms. Kelly Campanella she's backstage, but she's going to join us. She is a senior litigation counsel with NCR Voyix. So between the 5 of us, we'll be split up and look forward to chatting about what you've already heard or questions you might have, or just generally networking once we go into those breakout rooms. So I'm going to ask my assistant backstage, who's hopefully listening, to go ahead and put us into breakout rooms, and then we'll wrap up on the other side of that in about 12 or 13 minutes. So Jalen, if you're there, go ahead. Okay, we're back. We're going to wrap things up. I hope everybody had a really enjoyable and helpful breakout room experience. I know our room was great. We had a UGA and a Georgia State 1L who had some terrific questions, and Kelly had all the answers. I'm going to introduce Kelly. Kelly's another one of our board members. She is a senior litigation counsel at NCR Voyix here in Atlanta. And our board is comprised of 11 attorneys. So I hope you'll follow us on the Atlanta Bar Association website. Come out to our events. Law students are, I say, always welcome, at least almost always welcome, I think, just to leave us a little wiggle room. Thank you to Mandy for moderating, and Amy and Michelle for being panelists. I thought that was a great discussion. Any parting shots before we wrap up the webinar today? Nope. Great. All right. Well, everyone have a terrific rest of your spring semester, and good luck with your school and your careers, as the case may be. Thank you.